good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Today's session is going to be on the circular economy and waste management. I'm joined today by Lucy Picken of Action Sustainability, who's going to be taking you through today's presentation. Super jazzed to have Lucy back with us. She's a great presenter, very knowledgeable on the subject. So do ask questions, do get involved. I know we've got a Menti poll coming up, so would love to get for you guys to get engaged, ask questions, send in your responses, all of that. I'm going to take you through just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So first and foremost, my name is Wendy Carradine. I'm the operations manager for the Supply Chain School here in the US. If you ever have any issues accessing your platform or have any questions about our resources or content, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to support you. This session is being recorded, so you will be sent a version of the recording and slides after this session. If you are interested in other sessions that we're hosting, we're always hosting more training sessions. Those are all available on the website, which is supplychainschool.com. There's a little event tab up in the corner. Would very much encourage you to check that out on a regular basis. All of our training is free at the point of use, so absolutely make use of it. We do have a chat function. If you have any questions, I will be monitoring the chat as we go along. So please ask your question there. Don't feel like you need to wait until the end. Just drop it in, and we will either answer it in real time or we will wait to the end, depending on the flow of the day. Anything else? You will get a certificate of completion after today's session when you're marked as attended. Again, if you do have any issues with that certificate, just reach out to me. That just says that you were here, that you attended, and counts towards your CE hours. So a very useful thing for you to be awarded. I believe that's everything. Oh, we also have a feedback survey. If you could take just 2 minutes to fill out that survey at the end of the session, it's really, really useful to us if you just answer a couple questions about how you think the session was, if you found it useful, if you found it organized well, hopefully you do. Would very much appreciate it if you fill that out for us. All of that said, I'm going to now hand it over to Lucy, who's going to take you through today's session. So thank you, Lucy.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Wendy. A really good introduction as always. And thank you everyone for being so prompt and on time this afternoon or this morning, wherever you may be. And welcome to this session on an introduction to the circular economy. We've got in about an hour together today, just under, so a lot of content to get through. So let's get going. Just to introduce myself, as Wendy said, my name is Lucy Picken. I am a sustainability consultant at Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I specialise in both carbon and waste, but as you can probably tell, I'm here to talk waste and circular economy with you for this session today. My contact details are on screen if you do have any questions after the session. Me and Wendy are more than happy to answer any questions afterwards as well, if you've got nothing for today. Couple of outcomes. So what we're going to look at in today's session, hopefully at the end of the session, you'll have an improved understanding of the circular economy, the drivers that influence it. And we're also going to look a little bit about what waste is in general as well. We're going to look at considering this in the context of your own standards and requirements. So thinking how this applies to you as an organisation in the background as we talk about this today. And hopefully at the end, we'll look at considering opportunities to introduce circular ways of working in your own organization. I'm also going to talk about circular business models at one point in today's session. But then at the bottom there, you can see that hopefully as well, you'll be able to better explain the challenges and opportunities to your colleagues, your customers, and supply chain. But I always say if you go home this evening telling everyone about the circular economy or the waste management hierarchy, that's a win for me. You've learned something today. So hopefully you learn something. As Wendy just went through, and we have some house rules for today. We are on Zoom, so your microphones and cameras are off for this session. But as Wendy said, if you have any questions or comments, please do either use the Q&A or the chat function. We will monitor them as we go along. If there's anything school related, Wendy is more than happy to answer them. Anything content related, I can answer that, or vice versa. We'll both try our best. But like I just said, if you don't want to ask anything today, please do feel free to ask us after the session. You know where we are. You can get in touch with us. Please do get involved in the exercises we're going to run today. As Wendy said, I'm going to be using a Menti. We are a relatively small group, so do not worry about any of the answers you put. There is no wrong answers, or if for the open-ended questions, but for those that are more poll questions, it doesn't matter if you get them wrong. It's all anonymous for today. And finally, their slides and the recording will be distributed afterwards. So please do not worry about taking too many in-depth notes today. And I just want to touch on this before we get into the circular economy. And it's something we call the intervention points when we're looking at circularity. And it's just putting that emphasis on the continuous link to the circular economy. And as I mentioned before, about trying to think about how you can integrate the circular economy into your organization. This just shows that no matter where you are in the value chain, that you can have an influence, you have a part to play when it comes to the circular economy. So if you as an organization are the client and designer side of things, you can think about designing out waste from the start. You can think about different ways of manufacturing. But if you're on the supplier side of things, and this is something your clients are asking for, you can think about maybe having an influence on the better procurement of materials, improved behaviors with regard to waste minimization. Or if you're a demolition contractor, thinking about improving knowledge, etc., etc. Just to emphasize that we do all have a part to play when it comes to the circular economy. You all have the opportunity to influence different processes in a project. So think about that while we go throughout today's session. But like we've mentioned a couple of times, we are going to do a Menti. So what I'm going to do is ask you to head over to www.menti.com and enter the code, and I'll put it in the chat now, 3485 9668, or do scan the QR code on your screen now to just join us in there. Well, I drop the code into the chat for you, and I should be able to copy a link to. Like I said, relatively small group, but so please do join us here today and answer some questions. I will give you a couple of seconds to get into the Menti before I ask you the question. It's all anonymous, so nothing to fear on my Menti today. I'll give you a couple more seconds for the last couple of us to join. But I have dropped the link and the Menti code in the chat so you can join once we've got started, which I will do now. We are going to use this throughout the session, so do keep it up in the background. But my first question today, what comes to mind when you hear the words circular economy or resource efficiency? Like I said, all anonymous. You can answer as many times as you like. What words come to mind? It's going to make a nice word cloud. If you've got a few, just keep popping them in there. What comes to mind when you hear the words circular economy or resource efficiency? Do keep putting your answers in there. I'll read them in a couple of seconds. As you can see, the words get bigger as a few of us put the same answer. Reuse is that big one in there. Really good one to have in there. Recycling, reduce, rehab, plastics, landfills, better for the environment. Deconstruction, I might repeat myself, but I'll keep going. Plastics, saving money and material, really good one there. I like that one. Stream, we've got maintenance, cycle, landfills. I might have said that one. Some really good words in to see that reuse and recycling are them bigger ones there. Any more for any more before I crack on with the session? It's good to hear your thoughts on what comes to mind when we start thinking about the circular economy. Extend landfill life. Interesting one.
Well, that's a good one.
It is a good one. It's nice when I get words that I've not seen on my word cards before. Any more for any more? I'm going to leave it open in the background as I go through the presentation, so if anything does come to mind, feel free before I flick to the next one. So I do that just to kind of get an idea of what you guys think, what comes to mind when we think about circular economy. But I'm going to bring us right back to the basics and talk about what is waste and who might be interested, just so we're all on the same level playing field with what we're talking about today. So, the legal definition of solid waste offered by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is any garbage or refuse sludge from a wastewater treatment plant, water supply treatment plant, or air pollution control facility and other discarded material resulting from industrial, commercial, mining, and agricultural operations and from community activities. As you can see on there, a little bit of a long one. And the Environmental Protection Agency also notes that this definition of solid waste is not limited to waste that are physically solid, but there's also waste that are liquid, semi-solid, or contained as gaseous materials as well. But I've also brought in the EU Waste Framework Directive as well, because there's also the definition on there's different definitions on a global basis, and it's also nice to bring in different definitions because this one summarizes it all quite nicely. So the EU Waste Framework Directive describes waste as any substance or object that the holder discards or intends to or is required to discard. A little bit of a shorter version. So this description implies that a substance or object is considered to be a waste once it's been decided that there's no further practical use for it. So the word discard in particular also implies that an object has no value, something that's not needed, something that might be unwelcome, and at all the times the substance or object should be considered as an item with a potential for continued use. So renaming substances or objects as resources, arising, spares, surplus can help us to maybe identify the difference and shift our mindset a little bit. Because it's something to think about that maybe something useful or maybe our valuable resources are in the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the wrong time. And skips on sites or our bins in our offices are full of really useful stuff that we could use elsewhere. It's about starting to shift that mindset. Which brings me really nicely to what we're all here today to talk about is the circular economy. So as you can see there on screen, a circular economy is an alternative to a traditional linear economy where we make, use and dispose, in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible, extract the maximum value from them whilst in use, then recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of each service life. So to summarize this quite long statement as well, it's just about making our items last longer and keeping them in use for as long as possible. And here is the circular economy expressed with some good graphics, I would say. At the top here, we have that linear economy that I just mentioned. So in a linear economy, we get our raw materials. So we might grow them, we might mine them, we might quarry them, for example. And then these raw materials go through a process of design. They're then manufactured to come together, and then we consume them. And then sadly, but typically, we end up disposing of them at the end of the life. We just throw them away. However, this has been due to a lack of attention to resource use, something that we've just not cared about for a long time. And this hasn't been an issue, but now we are becoming a little bit more mindful. We are thinking about different things we can do. So this brings me to our nice round image at the bottom, our circular economy. We take these raw materials initially, they've come from somewhere, and these go into a process of design, but thinking about the end of life, keeping the end of life in mind right at the beginning stage, such as how might we repair this item? How might we maintain it? How might we reuse it? How might we recycle it when it comes to the end of its life? This then feeds into the manufacture phase where we think about doing things differently. Can we use off-site manufacturing, for example, where we take away the construction on-site process? We then consume them, so maybe we think a little bit more carefully about what we're doing with our items. And then we get to these dark blue parts here, and you can see the connection, the linear economy. So instead of disposing, we think about how might we maintain that item? How might we fix it up a little bit so we can keep it going? How might we reuse it? We don't need it for this anymore, so where can we reuse it? How can we refurbish it into something else we can use, for example? And then at the very end of the circular economy, we recycle. So we might break something down so that the parts can be put back into the design process and we can use them parts again. And we can only do this because we think about circularity at the very beginning. We think with a circular mindset from the design stage. We think about what is going to happen at the end of life. And this is quite a nice quote, another long quote, but a nice quote from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is an organization who does a lot around the circular economy and definitely worth having a look at. But they say that the circular economy is based on three principles driven by design. The first being eliminating waste and pollution. Hopefully, that one's self explanatory. Circulating products and materials at their highest value, which I've just talked through. But then we've got regenerating nature there at the bottom. And this one's a really interesting point to look at because we as humans have learned and we're continuing to learn that our natural systems are our most effective barriers to climate change. We must protect nature and push for nature positive because why would we continue to break our systems when it'll take us a long time to design something that works half as well as what we have naturally? And at the bottom here, we have some big words that can make us think about our processes a little bit differently. So you can see there that it says it is underpinned by a transition to renewable energy and materials. A circular economy decouples economic activity for the consumption of finite resources. It is a resilient system that is good for business, people, and the environment. So this makes us think, can we do stuff differently? Can we bring materials to sites differently? And what this tells us is it's as much as the way we do business and bring products to the market as much as the products themselves. So thinking about circular business models. And I've got a good slide on this in a couple of slides' time. But one thing again I want to emphasize on this slide is you can start to see the different interlinkages between topics. It says there business, people, and the environment. We've got regenerating nature. Waste isn't an isolated topic where it just works on its own. By reducing waste and being more circular, we start thinking about reducing carbon, looking after our natural environment, looking after people, but still can be profitable. So there's different things connect in with waste and resource efficiency. I skipped 2 slides then. So this is quite a crazy image on screen, but again, this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And it talks you through kind of how we can, another version of a circular economy and how we can do things differently. So looking over on the right-hand side, this is where we're going to focus our attention. So this is where we have the technical nutrients or our materials, for example. You can see the flow down the middle from the mining/materials manufacturer to parts manufacturer, product manufacturer, service provider, and then it drops out the bottom to energy recovery and landfill. This central element would be our linear economy. However, in a circular economy, we think about how can we as the user maintain our items so that we keep it in use? And if not, how can I reuse it instead? Maybe sending the parts back to the service provider so they can reuse it. Maybe how can I refurbish it because we can't reuse them components? How can the product manufacturer think about refurbishing or maintaining my product? And then we have recycling. So at the last resort, we think about how can the parts manufacturer recycle the components so that it can be used again as parts into the product in the future. Thinking about different elements. But this is quite a complex image of the circular economy. And it's important that circularity isn't just about recycling, and we need to step away from not a fixation, but the mindset that recycling is our sole option and our best and only approach. A lot of the time, when we think about sustainability in general, there's something called the carbon tunnel vision, where we think carbon is where I have to focus my attention. As much as I love talking about carbon, and I will answer as many questions as you like about carbon, we do need to think about all the other sustainability topics as well. And when we're looking at circularity, like I say, it isn't just about recycling. It's thinking, do you need it? Can you fix it? Could you design it better? Could somebody else use it? Are you in the construction industry and you have two projects working simultaneously? One's got too many items. Can we use it on the other sister site? Can we save time and money? Loads of different questions, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Thinking about how we can step away from recycling and how can we step into this different circular mindset. Another crazy image to show you, but I will talk you through this. But it's coming back to that more technical sphere of things. And again, this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which I said before has really great resources which are worth checking out. And this one is showcasing circular business models in the current value chain. And it shows how 3 different business models can work together to form a circular economy. So these models are circular design, circular use, and circular recovery. Hopefully you can see my mouse because I am circling them at the top here. So this starts with designing to improve service life and improve how a product is maintained, repaired, refurbished, or remanufactured at the end of its life. All these things that I've already said. But it then might be selling a product so that it is purchased back after a period of time, or providing spare parts and add-ons which support the repairing of products. So it's moving away from a transactional process with products, but instead selling a service where the products are part of that service. And that's all part of the circular economy and makes a circular business model. So the organization that provides that service delivery is essentially taking responsibility for that product. So they might buy it back when it's broken so that they can fix it up and sell it on secondhand, providing a repair service so you can keep using it, or providing spare parts, for example, so you can fix it yourself. Different processes that mean, like I say, we step away from a transactional process and move into a support service, for example. I have quite a few examples that I can give of different organizations that are everyday examples of introducing circular business models. But for today, I'm going to talk to you about IKEA really quickly and how they've implemented circular business models. I think this is quite a global organization, definitely is here on the European side of things. But IKEA, if you don't know IKEA, they're a furniture organization. But IKEA say on their website that they design products from the very beginning to be then buzzwords, reused, refurbished, remanufactured, and as a very last resort, they recycle them. So they say that this means they design to be able to use renewable or recycled materials as the input. They have standardization, so it's standard parts rather than really complex different pieces. They care, they offer repair services, they have adaptable designs, they design for disassembly and reassembly, which is what this one's showing here. I'll talk to that in a sec, and remanufacturing and also recyclability. So as I said, this is kind of one of their assembly techniques, is something they called a click technique, which makes it easy for you to both assemble and disassemble the product. So say you are moving house, for example, it means it won't get damaged in the process. Makes it easy to take your furniture with you when you move. They also do a lot of buy, not a lot, but they have a buyback scheme where you can sell on your item. They'll give you a cheaper price than what you bought it for, but you'll get some money back. They'll then refurbish it, make it look good, and then they'll sell it on at a cheaper price as well to a secondhand consumer. They also, in some of their stores, have kind of walls where you have loads of parts, screws, bolts, etc. So if you lose one, you can go and get one for free. And if you've ever been to an IKEA store, they sell everything in different pieces for when you need to go build the furniture. And that's so that if one piece breaks, you don't have to buy the whole furniture set again. You just have to buy that one specific part. And that's just a couple of examples as well. So before we talk a little bit about stakeholders as well, I would really like to ask my second Menti question. Back to the Menti, I'm going to ask you who might be interested and who might influence you as an organization to drive circularity? Who might push you to be more circular? All anonymous, back on the Menti again. Comment about how much we like IKEA in the chat as well. Really like that one. Got some answers coming in. Some really good ones. The clients, they're probably going to be driving this if they have their own ESG targets, for example. And if anyone feels comfortable to do so, please do drop in the chat what your clients are starting to ask you as well when it comes to circularity or even just anything sustainability. Really interested in that, especially from the US perspective and how you kind of respond to that. We've got consumers and customers, your staff, that's a really good one. Your staff might come to you for what you're doing. The surrounding community, local community, government might be driving this. We've got a couple slides on this in a little bit. And on the US side of things, it can be governmental, it can be state level, it can be county level as well. That's a really interesting one. Society, linking in with the community. The business owner, that's a good one. They might be asking for this. Your shareholders, yeah, they might be looking for this. These kind of all link together as well, don't they, in a lot of ways? And someone in the chat has said customers and industry. Yeah, really good answers as well. Just shows who's pushing this and who might be driving you to make changes. Another one that we get quite a lot in this is everyone. Everyone might be interested in this as well. Everyone who's in this call today is definitely interested. Some really good answers there. Really means I don't have to give you the answers because you've got some really good answers there. But yeah, absolutely. It's really nice to hear what you think in terms of stakeholders and who might be driving this, who might be interested and influencing you. And like I said, if you've got any comments about maybe what your clients are seeing or maybe what your customers are saying, do drop that in the chat. I'd like to read them towards the end and see your thoughts on that. And then just another point as well, just to touch on before we get into the policy and drivers, is that I've already touched on this a little bit about different topics interlinking with each other. But when we talk about sustainability, it all ultimately links in with something called the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if you've not heard of these are a set of 17 interconnected goals that you can see here on screen, brought together by the UN member states in 2015, actually now, so over 10 years ago, as part of the 2030 agenda to drive sustainable development, having the goal to end poverty, protect the planet, ensure prosperity, peace, and justice for all. And when we talk about circularity and resource efficiency and waste, we probably have the most direct link to number 12 here, responsible consumption and production. But again, and I'm going to keep banging on about it today, is that we have that interlinkage with all the different topics as well. So you can see number 13, climate action, for example. We might not, as an organization, be able to drive our carbon reduction without looking at waste reduction and circularity. It will have them hand in hand benefits, especially if you've done your carbon footprinting. It might be a massive one for you. Life below water as well. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a great example, floating between California and Hawaii. You can only imagine the impacts that having a massive patch of waste in the Pacific Ocean, about 3 times the size of France. You can only imagine how that is impacting the life below water and the biodiversity in there as well. So just a couple of examples, but just to emphasize this interlinkage with different sustainability topics. So we are going to get a little bit into policy and drivers for change, looking at the legislation side of things. I know this can be a little bit dry, but hang on to your hat. We will try and make it as exciting a level and talk you through this one. So Wendy was really kind enough to pull this slide together on US legislation, looking at just a handful of states and outlining key legislation that's happening, typical landfills and fee signals that we're starting to see, and notes and sources as well. Again, I know how complex the US kind of landscape of legislation can be, so it's nice to see just a handful of examples here. So looking at the top there, the California Integrated Waste Management Act, and also has the short-lived climate pollutants as well, looking at mandatory diversion and organics reduction as well. Looking over at the landfill side of things, there isn't a single state landfill tax. So there's that median tipping fee of $36 to $50 per ton, varying by facility. Again, really complex and it just depends where you are. So it's always worth looking where you are, how the landfill tax applies to you, and how you're disposing of your waste. And you can see there the notes and sources that Wendy added there is that the Cal Recycle landfill tonnage and fee reports are something to have a look at. And also them implementation documents as well are worth looking at in terms of getting more information. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. I thought I'd talk through one that you can see there and how it's been pulled together. But all the sources are there for any of the information that you want to have a look at. And like we said at the start, you'll get these slides after the session. But you can even see here, New York has the solid waste permitting and reporting. But again, no statewide landfill tax, and it depends on the county and the facility. Even as high as $150 per ton of waste when you're disposing of this as well. So again, worth considering and looking at where you're disposing of your waste and making sure you're aware of this. Because it can add up in terms of the financials. So keep that in mind when we get to the financial case later on in the session. And we're just going to talk quickly on EPR, and Wendy's got some really good slides to talk to you about. But what does Google say, and why is this theme important? So as you can see there, extended producer responsibility is a policy approach that makes producers responsible for their products along the entire life cycle, including at the post-consumer stage. So by doing so, it helps achieve environmental goals such as recycling targets as well. And this is something that we're only just starting to see this side of the pond as well in the UK, but it's something that's happening on a global basis when we're looking at EPR, especially across the EU as well. So it's good to see that you're going to see on the next slide that there's something happening with regard to EPR. I'm going to pass over to Wendy to talk over this bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, hi everyone again. I'm going to just talk through a little bit about this subject. So, we're talking about policy that's shifting the responsibility to the producer. So, I'm going to talk about these EPR rules that are coming into effect in North America. In Europe, we have the right to repair. You know, there's a lot of shifting the responsibility to the manufacturers, people selling the products. So, why is this important? Why do we need to focus on this right now? So, states with extended PCR rules. This is post-consumer recycled material rules that are coming into effect. There are currently 7 states and 9 Canadian provinces. Shout out to any of my fellow Canadians that have enacted EPR laws for packaging, which is shifting the disposal cost to producers. What does that mean? So, if you are doing business in any of these 7 states, or you operate in any of these states, these rules will apply to you. So you need to familiarize yourself with what that means and what are your responsibilities. So it's very straightforward, and I'm going to take you through it on the next slide. But basically, what you need to know yeah, go ahead, Lucy. Yeah, thank you so much. Um, Here's how it works. First, if you are a manufacturer of a product, you have to register with a producer responsibility organization. Currently, the main one is the Circular Action Alliance. It's free to sign up and create an account with them, I believe. So you start by registering with them. Then you start collecting your data on the materials that are covered, so paper, plastic, metal and glass, any kind of packaging. Then you submit that to the PRO. You pay a fee to the PRO to support the program and implement the recycling initiatives that are then laid out for your local community. So if you achieve those targets that you had set with the PRO, you're starting to recycle more of your materials. Your packaging becomes more efficient and contains more PCR, which is great. Everybody wins. Yay! Everyone's happy on the right-hand side of the screen. If you fail to reach your targets or you don't, if you don't reach your targets or you don't sign up with the PRO, basically, if you don't follow the rules, there is a chance that you could get penalized financially. And those financial penalties could reach anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 per day. And they can also result in you being restricted from selling your goods and services in those states. So, carrot and stick, something to be aware of. If you go to the next slide, please, Lucy. Thank you. The Circular Action Alliance is very rich in resources for you to have a look at. If you're sitting there looking at that map that I showed on the screen a few moments ago, you're going like, well, I don't operate in any of those states, and I don't have anything to do with those states. Unlikely because they're, California is a huge state and basically has, tentacles in all the other states. There are other EPR laws coming into effect in other states as well. So while they're not online yet, while they're not live currently, they're in the pipeline for Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Tennessee. It's a lot of states. So the wave is coming. It's something that you need to be ready for. It doesn't take much to do that preparation, and I've linked on this slide here a really, really useful white paper from Taft. It is full of very useful information. I will include this in the email that goes out after today's session, but really good for you to just sort of be aware of. I don't want anyone getting caught out by this. So yeah, do have a quick read through if you are in this space, if it is something that applies to you, or if you just want to know more about it. It's very useful to just sort of be aware of what's happening in the industry because as we sort of talked about in that Menti poll, this is something that everyone needs to care about. We all want less plastic waste in our lives, less paper waste in our lives. And we have a wealth of resources that are available to us in that waste sphere. So we really do need to be making better use of that, which is sort of the theme of today's session. Anyway, that's my spiel. If anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat, and I'm going to hand it back over to Lucy.
Perfect. Thanks, Wendy. I think this image in particular is really useful to help understand that as well. And like Wendy said, we've got a breadth of resources. I think that's the word I was looking for. But if there's anything you want to learn more, if you want to do more reading, let us know. And myself and Wendy can put our heads together to get the resource library on the US school as well populated a little bit more if there's anything you want to see. So a couple of final bits when it comes to legislation. It's a really hard act to follow when Wendy had some really great slides, but we've got something called the waste management hierarchy. And just to get your brains thinking as well, we're going to head back to the Menti. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, really quick ones, doesn't matter if you get them wrong. Which do you think is the most sustainable option in the waste hierarchy? Do you think it's energy recovery, recycling/composting, source reduction and reuse, or treatment and disposal? There's also versions of the waste management hierarchy around the world as well. So here in the UK, we just call it the waste hierarchy. I had to put waste hierarchy for the size of the line, but waste management hierarchy in this case. Couple of answers coming in. 4 of us saying source reduction and reuse. 1 of us saying treatment and disposal. Any more guesses? Now we'll go on to my next question. I think you can see where this is going. Which do you think is the least sustainable option in the waste hierarchy? Or waste management hierarchy, sorry. Energy recovery, recycling/composting, source reduction and reuse, or treatment and disposal. Same answers as before. I'm asking, but the least sustainable this time. Got 4 of us seeing treatment and disposal. Does anyone think any differently? Give you a couple seconds. If not, we'll flick back over to the session. No more for no more. Cool. I'll give you the answers. So most of us were correct. Yeah, maybe one of us got confused on that first one. But source reduction and reuse does sit there at the top with treatment and disposal there at the bottom. But I've just got this image from the EPA website just to go into a little bit more detail on the waste management hierarchy. Again, like I say, there's versions of this on a global basis with slightly different names, slightly different labels as well. But essentially, this is the key to using less materials and avoiding waste. So you may have seen this before or a version of this before, but for those who haven't, the higher up this reverse pyramid we are, the closer we are to zero waste. And as the closer we are to a circular economy, and again, that interlinkage is coming in, the lower our whole life carbon is as well. And vice versa, the further down we are, the more linear we are, the higher our whole life carbon is, and we've got a lot of waste probably, or it's just going to landfill, for example. And like I said, this hierarchy exists in different ways, different headers, but the general principles are the same throughout. So I have this general one for now. If we look at the top there, if I run top to bottom here, source reduction and reuse. Here we would start reconsidering what we're doing, looking at preventing what we buy, also reusing items that we already have. And some packaging is designed for reuse, for example. If I bring an example from the UK side of things, there may be US-based examples. There's an organization called the Pallet Loop. So they estimated here in the UK that up to 90% of wooden pallets were going out to construction sites and then just being thrown away and chucked into landfill. So they created a business model where they take them back, they refurbish them, they reuse them, they go back out to site, they come back and they keep getting reused and reused and reused. Then we get into recycling and composting. So this is when we prepare for reuse, we maintain the quality of our materials. But when we get into recycling, it includes further processes, but will retain some value of our products, for example. So this might be breaking bricks and blocks for the use in aggregates, or maybe shredding packaging for plastic pellets. We lose that initial integrity of the item. However, we do have something else we can use. And that's that final section of the circular economy, bringing it back to our round image. Energy recovery. So, for example, we see incineration, anaerobic indigestion. You'll get some energy recovery if using the likes of energy from waste schemes, and we'll get a residual material, the energy that we get from that. But we cannot maintain the value of that product. Once it's lost, it's lost. We can't reuse or recycle the components. And then at the bottom here, treatment and disposal. This is where we hit landfill, where we do not want to be. So it's worth considering where you are. So if you're sat at treatment and disposal primarily at the moment, thinking about how you can step into energy recovery, maybe thinking about recycling and composting, just boosting yourself up the waste management hierarchy. Where am I now? How can I improve on what I'm doing? Okay, as promised, I'm going to touch on the financial case because Wendy shared some really good information on the financials around EPR. So we're going to touch on this and why. Why should we be talking about the costs of it, waste costs ultimately? This is, you can see where this is going. I've got some more questions for you. But Zero Waste Scotland, here in the UK side of things, estimated the true cost of waste. On the left of this seesaw image, you can see that a skip hire was estimated to be around $300 to have it brought and taken from site by a contractor. This is just a price. It may vary depending on where you are. But the cost doesn't stop there. What actually happens is there are a lot of other hidden costs associated with the generation, handling of waste, and surveys from Zero Waste Scotland showed that this could add up to an additional $2,100, creating a total true cost of waste of around $2,400. So you can see that easily identified cost of the skip hire, $300. But what I'm going to ask you, you know where we're going, is what do you think them hidden costs, what do you think adds up to create the true cost of waste? So where we're going to go is back to our Menti. What do you think are the other contributing factors to the true cost of waste? So we've got that skip hire. What might be hidden? What's below the tip of the iceberg? Things that we might not consider when we start talking about the financials behind just throwing away our waste. I've got one answer in there. I'll give you a second. I think you can add more than one on my Menti. I believe you can, because there's three answers and two people have responded so far. Okay, so we've got transport. Yep, you've got to pay for the transport of it, the fuel associated with transporting, for example. Duplicate purchasing. Yeah, you might be over ordering, thinking, I don't want to do this order twice. I'm going to over order or duplicate my purchases, and that just adds up because you end up throwing some of it away. The manufacturing costs, that kind of links in with the duplicating purchasing in my head as well. You're paying for the cost of the manufacturing. Utilities, yeah, also linking in with the storage of it as well. You might be paying utility costs for storing the waste. Consumer mindset, I really like this one. That links in with that linear economy, links in with that some mindset to just throw things away. I'm going to have to go through some of these quite quickly. Downtime, manpower cost, packaging. I like that someone said that. Keep that one in mind for a few slides' time. On-site education and people's awareness, that training element, absolutely. Let's do some toolbox talks to get that mindset shifting. Damage, that's a really good one. Damaging, like products that have been damaged either on-site or maybe in the transport process. Extraction, disposal, on-site education, consumer mindset, site housekeeping. That links in with the damage one for me as well. The site housekeeping. It's really good answers. I could sit and look at this all day and speak about this. A4. Is someone talking about EPDs here? If you are, I really like that answer. But please do feel free to drop more thoughts in the chat. Because of time, I'm going to have to move on, but I could sit and talk about this all day with you. You're absolutely correct. You can see the headlines here about the sort of things that are adding up to them hidden costs of waste. Waste management, that storage element, linking in with the utilities piece, damaged and wasted raw materials, design driven waste. So maybe we haven't got standard designs that are the same. Say we have to order our wood, for example, in 1 meters, but our designs are at 80 centimeters and we're constantly got offcuts. We've got design driven waste and wasted energy and labor, all the things that we've just said, but all of these things that add up to the true cost of waste. Things we just don't think about really, do we? But things that we do have to pay for when it comes to looking after our waste. Even labor, someone's got to sort the waste, for example. So loads of different things that add up to that true cost of waste. Some really good answers in there. And again, just some highlights of what was kind of found in that survey, linking into what we just said. We've got that client and design influence, thinking about materials of unsuitable dimensions and not using standard sizes. The client or designer might change their mind after you've ordered products. Delivery of products, things were overordered. Method of packaging, maybe we've got things wrapped in loads of plastic packaging that wasn't needed. Method of transport was inadequate, things got damaged. Site management and practices over on the right-hand side here, thinking about untidy sites, poor storage and handling, all links in with that behavior element that we've just touched on that word cloud, undue cutting and fixing. Just having that mindset of things don't really matter. So we just don't have that care with our products. They just get thrown away. The client's paying for it. Why would we care? But obviously it matters. Everything matters. It all adds up. I think I've got a couple of last questions for you. We mentioned plastics on that last slide. I said to keep it in mind because I had a couple more for you. It's not on my Menti. So I'll ask you to drop in the chat for me. What percentage of global plastics production do you think is packaging? Have a quick think and drop it in the chat for me. Do you think what percentage of global plastics production is packaging? Do you think it's 7%, 26%, or 44%? Give you a couple seconds. 26, 26. I've got a 44, another 44. Any more for any more? Another 44. I've got a second question for you. What percentage of plastics waste is packaging? Do you think it's 17, 44, or 63? 63. We're all saying 63 on this one. 63, 63. Anyone think differently? Give you a couple seconds. What percentage of plastics waste is packaging? I'll give you the answers. I've got another 63 at the last second. It's really important that we talk about this. Someone mentioned it on our word cloud, and it's just because we don't value packaging at all. And we talked again back to the word cloud. Someone mentioned it, something that we just throw away because we don't think we have a use for it and it's just not valued. But actually, plastic packaging made and used represents only 26% of the total volume of plastics used. However, plastic packaging waste represents 63%. So this is relatively old data now, but it still holds pretty well. And it shows that we just don't value plastic packaging, like I said, because only 26% of all plastics used, but it's then 63% of all plastics wasted. So not a big amount used, but a massive amount that is wasted, something that we just chuck away. And if I just flick back to this slide, it's thinking about how we're delivering our products. Why have we got loads of packaging on it if we're not going to use it and it's just going to get thrown away? Or can we speak to our suppliers and think about how we reuse the packaging? Can we use something that's readily recyclable, for example? Or can we just prevent that packaging or reduce the amount of packaging we're using if there's another way we can do it? Different ways to consider, different things to consider because we just don't value plastic packaging or plastics in general, really. Which comes into my last section before I've got a quick case study and some resources to show you. The resources are on the UK school, I believe, but we may have added them to the US library, but we can make sure that we get them added. Quickly on designing out waste. So this is the first stage of the circular economy. Thinking back to that circular diagram I showed you, design being at the very beginning. The circular economy, as you can see here, is a systematic response that addresses a design problem and not a waste problem. And this came from Zero Waste Scotland's Designing Out Waste Guide. But essentially, as you can see here, the principles for a design approach is adopting a design approach that focuses on materials resource efficiency so that less material is used in the design and or less waste is produced in the construction process without compromising the design concept. You can see there that we've got a little bit on lean design. We haven't got it as part of this session, but we can definitely talk about this in the future. But we want our designs to work well and also look good. We spend a lot of time on our products. We spend a lot of time on our concepts and what we're designing. We just don't need to compromise waste, resource efficiency, and we don't need to compromise sustainability in our designs. So thinking about how we can take new approaches, designing for manufacture, designing for disassembly, designing for maintaining, designing for reuse. All them buzzwords I said at the beginning. How can we design with these concepts in mind so that our products do the same thing that they're intended to do, but we don't have to compromise on waste, sustainability, resource efficiency, thinking about how we can be more circular from the very get-go, bringing it full circle back to the beginning. And again, we have a designing out waste session, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. But when we start thinking about designing out waste, we look at design for resource efficient procurement. How can we think about who we're working with, who we choose to buy from, the materials that we're buying as well? Thinking back to the packaging example, can we work with suppliers who are looking at preventing waste or have recyclable materials in them? Designing for materials optimization, again, thinking about the materials we work with. Thinking about how we can design for off-site construction if that's a possibility. Designing for reuse and recovery at the end of life, and also designing for deconstruction and flexibility. Why glue everything together so we have to rip it all apart and break it when we can screw it together and easily take it all apart, for example? So thinking about all these different elements at the very beginning, so at the end of life, we don't have to compromise on sustainability. And this graph shows that the earlier you get involved, the more chance you have of achieving results. However, I'm going to say back to the beginning on that intervention points, wherever you get involved makes a difference, especially if it comes to lessons learned. Maybe the client's trying to do better next time, and you've been boots to the ground as a contractor and you know what happened, why things got wasted. Or maybe you are the client and you can think, who was on the ground? Who can help us do better next time? The earlier that you can get involved, the more likely, the more chance you have of making a difference and having seen higher results. But do speak to everyone, speak to the clients, speak to those on site, speak to the whole value chain, because everyone might have opinions or thoughts that can help make that difference. But the best option, as I say, is to get in as early as possible, but get in where you can. Okay, I have a quick example to run you through. We have about 12 minutes, so we're doing really good for time. Examples and some resources for you. And then if you have any questions for myself and Wendy, please do drop them in the chat and we'll read them at the end. So start dropping them in now if you haven't done so already. So this presentation is from an organization called Target, who manufacture vinyl floors. So they identified the climate emergency, tackling carbon emissions and the climate impact that they were having is no longer leading their sustainability approach, and they had to commit to different things. So, being more resource efficient and having a commitment that is embedded in their products as well. So this slide here shows their 5 principles that they had. So you can see, might be a little bit blurry. You'll get the slides after the session, but I'll also read you through them. Material health, product circularity, renewable energy and climate requirements, water stewardship, and also social fairness. You can see that direct link to what we're talking about today, though. Products are intentionally designed for their next use and are actively cycled in their intended use cycles. So they've designed with end of life in mind, thinking about how that product can be used at the end of life. However, they're actively kept in use for as long as possible, is what I'm seeing from that. They keep them in use for as long as possible, but if it does get to the end of its life, they've thought about that in advance. And then you can see here as well, they've got loads of different principles. So putting recyclable post-use, so a functional system to collect installation waste and post-use waste. And the waste is transported to a facility where the material is recycled into new raw materials or products. So bringing it back into the cycle as well. As you can, this word I find hard to say every time, but they say all the European vinyl collections were phthalate free. I think that's how you say it. Phthalate free. Phthalate free. But I think that link again, good for people and the environment. So investigating the health and safety and environmental credentials of all the materials. So they're thinking about everything throughout the process. And then an important bit for some of their clients, looking at how you can support your clients with sustainability targets and achieving green building certifications. These certifications differ where we are. Here in the UK, we see BREEAM a little bit more. Over there in the US, I know you see LEED a little bit more. So it's how these products can also help with them commitments. You've got to be profitable as an organization. You've got to be able to work as well. So thinking about how you can support your clients, not just for your own sustainability targets, but achieving theirs as well and hitting them green building certifications at the same time, something that's important to a lot of organizations. Got a couple of construction projects that we've mentioned before in some of our sessions. This first one being the Green Valley Road Bridge. I believe this is in Ohio in the US. So essentially, this project replaced an old bridge using salvaged steel members from another local bridge rather than purchasing all new steel. And this resulted in, I think, around $51,000 being saved compared to using all new materials. And the reuse of structural components led to both obviously waste diversion, but also cost savings, as I just mentioned. So having both them benefits. Waste diversion isn't just about material recycling, but also about avoiding new materials procurement and using existing structural elements. So how they embedded old materials and brought them back into the process so that they could be used for a new bridge. And then this one's an EU funded example about circular construction initiative, looking at prefabricated concrete slabs for a new bridge, which incorporated 50% recycled concrete aggregate and waste bioash. So something that we've been asked a few times is how can bioash be reused as well? So the project recognized that a third of all EU waste was from construction and demolition, and for the bridge slabs, 50% of the aggregates were replaced with recycled concrete. And again, this moves beyond just diverting waste and it demonstrates using a waste as a resource in a new infrastructure element. So something that, again, thinking back to that definition at the beginning, something that may have been considered a waste has now become a resource to be able to reuse again. And just shows how circular economy principles can be used in infrastructure projects as well. We might sometimes think that they're just buildings or homes, but definitely can be used in all industries as well. So this is kind of a call to action. I have a Menti for this, but we don't need to use it. If you've got any best practices that you would like to share in terms of good things in your organization that you're doing for circularity, please do let us know. Please do drop them in the chat. It's really nice to see good examples, and I just like reading what you guys are up to as well. But then also what's not going so well, or maybe what opportunities you think there are to introduce things, or where you've got a sticking point in your organization. Again, another nice thing to hear because someone may have the solution in the chat as well. So please do let us know in the chat along with any questions that you have while I wrap up with the resources and kind of final summary. I haven't got any resource links in here, but we can drop them either in the email chain. Wendy mentioned some good resources on the links that we had earlier in the slide deck, and definitely check out the library of resources that we have there. And kind of my call to action when you do review that library looking for resources is if you see anything and you think there's a gap or you would like to read about something in particular, do let myself and Wendy know because we can look at plugging them gaps, making sure there's good resources in the library for you to look at, to share with your colleagues and to share with your organizations as well. It's kind of a call to action on that to let us know what you'd like to see there as well. Lots of call to actions today. But
Mhm.
my final kind of reminder is the waste management hierarchy and looking at these couple of things. Key to using less waste is the waste management hierarchy, thinking about where you are now, boosting yourself up, you'll be more circular and you'll have that lower whole life carbon. And thinking like the circular economy stops here. It stops at recycling. If I go into this next slide, it stops at recycling. The last stage is there. But the key thing about the circular economy is thinking about the end of life of your projects or your products or anything that you may be doing at the very beginning, at the design stage. You think about this at the beginning, you'll hopefully see the impacts in years and years to come as well. So that's the end of our session. Just to thank you all for joining us today. This is the time for myself and Wendy to answer any of your questions. And if you have any feedback for us, we much appreciate this. It helps us with what you would like to learn in the future as well. If there's anything we've kind of mentioned today on any sustainability topic, not just waste, do let us know because we can put a session on that in the future. I'm sure Wendy can add that to our program, our training program. But I'm
Yeah.
just gonna Sorry, Wendy, I'm just going to stop
Yeah.
here. So if you do want to answer this and you have any good examples, do let us know because we do have 5 or so minutes. I'll
Yeah,
let
we'll
Wendy
definitely leave
speak
that up
now.
on screen. I absolutely would love to hear of any interesting stories that you have to tell on waste and circularity, or any challenges. Because yeah, I mean, if it's something that you guys are facing, we don't want you to suffer alone. Absolutely want to hear about it. And like Lucy said, maybe somebody on this call or someone within the supply chain school community has a solution for you. So, speak up. Um, if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Like we said, we'll be circulating a few, pun not intended, circulating a few resources. Oh, I'm corny today. In an email later today. Would very much love for you guys to check those out. Um, if you do think of anything after this call and have a question or something that you want to share, any ideas on vinyl wall covering recycling solutions? Oh, that's an interesting one. Um, will probably depend on where you are, but Reggie, I'm happy to take that away and come back to you with something that you'll hopefully find useful. Yeah, okay, great. Any statewide, or like, is it a state or is it countrywide? I'll wait for you to answer in the chat. Yeah, countrywide. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll dig up some resources and send them to you. Um, if anybody does have any, like I said, if anybody has any questions that you think of after the fact, just reach out to me and I will make sure that Lucy gets your question, or if it's something that I can answer, I will do my very best. We are always hosting sessions, not just on circularity. We're hosting one on sustainable infrastructure on Thursday. That's happening at 1 p.m. That's on our website. If that's something that you're interested in, we'd love to have you. We're nearing the end. Well, we're at the final month of Q2. Our Q3 training event calendar is going to be updated likely in a few weeks. So do keep an eye out for an updated event calendar on our website. And just a final reminder to submit your feedback form if you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to provide a little bit of feedback on today's session, we would very much appreciate it. If there are no questions, Lucy, I think we'll leave it there. Anything else that you wanted to add?
No, no, absolutely. That was absolutely good wrap up to the session. Just on your comment, Reggie, I'd be really interested to know about the reuse, thinking about how you can boost yourself up the hierarchy and shift away maybe from recycling if possible. Maybe you've already looked into that and there's a reason um, that you can't do that. But Wendy has mentioned we can look into that one as well in terms of specific recycling if that's where you're looking as well.
Mhm. Cool. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up with just a couple moments to spare. I want to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you so much for your time. I know everyone's busy, so it's really great to see you all at the session. And my heartfelt thanks to Lucy for another great session. It's always great to hear you speak. Your presentations are just they're top notch. Um, and I will we'll say goodbye, and we'll hope to see you at the next session.
Thank you very much.